Mason, Public Works Director for the City of Bloomington. We're here for the regularly scheduled Board of Public Works meeting for December 20th, 2022. It's 5:30 p.m. by my clock, and we're both on Zoom for virtual option and here in person at City Hall in the council chambers. For anyone attending via Zoom, for any public comment or any presentation needs, we'll unmute you as the time comes. If you have public comment on an item on the agenda, you can use the raise hand function. You can put a comment in chat, and we will make sure those get entered into the public record. But otherwise, I will turn it over to Board of Public Works President Kyla Cox-Deckard.
Thank you. I call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Public Works this Tuesday, December 20th, 2022. It is the last regular meeting of 2022. First up, we have messages from the board. Do we have any messages from board members this evening? I would just say, Adam, you might be planning on talking about this during staff reports, that we're expecting some adverse weather conditions.
I had that noted.
And I won't steal any information from you because I don't really have it, but I would just like to extend an advance thank you to the city staff, in particular the Public Works departments, that are called into action during those times, especially during the holiday season when we're all trying to get some rest. So appreciate in advance all the work that Public Works does to manage those snow, ice, and other adverse weather
It's not going to
events.
snow.
Yeah, okay. No snow, Adam says. In addition to sanitation out there in the elements as well. Next up is petitions and remonstrances. If we have anyone who would like to make a public comment about something that is not on the agenda this evening, now is the opportunity to do so.
There are no comments on Zoom.
All right, seeing none. Next up, we have the consent agenda. We do have items that we are going to adjust from consent agenda to the new business. One is item number 2, the confirm Flavia Burrell as the 2023 Board of Public Works designated representative on the city's Plan Commission. And then item number 3 is 2023 BDUAC appointments. Those will both be moved to the first and second items under new business. Do we have any other changes to the consent agenda?
No.
Okay, seeing none. Under the consent agenda this evening is the approval of minutes for November 22nd of 2022. We have 2023 CATS funding agreement, 2023 PEG Content Provider Agreement with WTIU, 2023 PEG Content Provider Agreement with MCPL, 2023 Service Agreement with SSW Enterprises for cleaning services at Public Works facilities, amendment to agreement with Central Square Lucidity for GIS web map functionality, change order number 2 for the Dunn Street Sidewalk Project, change order number 2 for the Hopewell Phase 1 East Demolition Project, a request from Landron Inc. for dumpster placement on West 9th between Walnut and Morton, December 20th, 2022, and February 16th of 2023. Resolution 2022-91, Pilley's Party Truck number 1. Resolution 2022-92, Pilley's Party Truck number 2. And Resolution 2022-93, Pilley's Party Truck number 3. And then approval of payroll. Do we have any public comments on anything within the consent agenda this evening? And if you're on Zoom, you can use the chat function or the raised hand function if you'd like to make a comment.
There are no comments on Zoom.
All right. Seeing none, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda for tonight's meeting, December 20, 2022.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next, we have new business. First under new business is confirm Flavia Burrell as 2023 Board of Public Works designated representative on the city's Plan Commission.
I guess I'll try to take that one. Adam Wason, Public Works Director. So this is a reappointment of Flavia Burrell for our rep on the Plan Commission, and we request your approval.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on this item?
I guess I'm just curious, the timing of this. It says she was appointed 2020, and it's a 4-year term.
I think we have annually reappointed.
Annual reappointments? Okay,
Yes.
great.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any public comments on this item?
No comments on Zoom.
Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we confirm Flavia Burrell as 2023 Board of Public Works designated representative on the city's planning commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next up is 2023 BDUAC appointments.
Yes, again, Adam Wason, Public Works Director, on behalf of Rick Dietz, our ITS Director. These are two appointments to the Bloomington Digital Underground Advisory Committee, also known as the BDUAC. They advise city on management of the Bloomington Digital Underground, other related city telecommunications and ITS infrastructure investments, and our strategic IT initiatives. The two appointments we're requesting approval for tonight are for Chris Robb and Mike Trotsky.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item? Any public comment on this item?
No comments on Zoom.
Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 2023 BDUAC appointments.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next up is Resolution 2022-89, City of Bloomington Policy and Procedures on Private Art Installations within the Public Right-of-Way.
Thank you, board members. Michael Rooker, City Attorney. I'm going to do the presentation on this one. Are you comfortable with me being over here and just doing that craning your neck thing? Great. Resolution 2289 proposes the adoption of a new policy on the installation of private art within the public right-of-way. The policy is designed to mitigate any negative impact private art within the public right-of-way might have on public safety and to limit the scope of private art in the public right-of-way so that it does not impose an undue burden on public resources. This policy does several things. First, we should probably note what the policy does not apply to. The policy does not apply to public art, that is, art that's specifically commissioned by the city. It applies to applications from private parties to place their own art within the public's right-of-way. Second, the policy does not apply to performative art, so the policy does not impact things like musical performances, dancing, poetry reading, things like that that might take place within the right-of-way. The policy imposes several requirements on all art within the right-of-way, regardless of the length of time the art is expected to remain within the right-of-way. All art must be submitted to the appropriate board or commission. Art may not use any copyrighted material unless the copyright is owned by the artist who is installing the art. No art within the right-of-way may mimic any traffic control device, and art may not depict material that is not available to all ages. The policy imposes additional requirements on semi-permanent or permanent art, which means art that is expected to remain within the right-of-way for 7 or more days. Applicants who want to install semi-permanent or permanent art must include more details on the planned art installation, and semi-permanent or permanent art installations may not contain speech. And by speech, we mean anything that is a word, a letter, a number, or a universally recognized symbol or logo. For public safety purposes, the proposed policy also implements additional criteria for street paintings or street murals. Street paintings and street murals are requests to put paint or some similar material on the road, which means the area where vehicles drive or park. If we think of that space, we commonly describe that as being between the two curbs. As with semi-permanent or permanent art, the policy requires that street painting applicants provide the city with more detail on the planned art. Street paintings are limited to local or secondary streets under the transportation plan. Those are more minor streets than arterial streets, and they may not be painted on streets that have a posted speed limit of more than 25 miles per hour. If any painting is proposed within an intersection, that intersection must also have all-way stop control. The pavement that the mural or street painting is proposed on must be in adequate condition for the paint to bond, and no paint may be placed on curbs or brick pavers. And all paintings of street murals must be at least 4 feet from any crosswalk, and the materials must be non-slip, street grade, and approved by the engineering department. Under the policy, the city will only accept proposals for private art in the right-of-way through the Neighborhood Improvement Grant Application Program or through a special event application. The forms for those applications or those programs are included in your packet as well. We appreciate your patience as we put this together. This policy involved the collaboration of many different city departments, and I can do my best to answer any questions board members may have about the policy.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item?
It just occurred to me today, what about art in parks? Do we have any occasions in which there are private installations of private art in our parks?
Boy, that's a wonderful question. We've had parks for a long time. I don't know that I could go through the history of all of the art that might be present in city parks, but certainly this policy wouldn't touch any of those installations. It only covers art that's within the public right-of-way. That policy also wouldn't come to this board. It would go to the Board of Park Commissioners because they have jurisdiction over park property, but that's a wonderful question and one that I can't answer for you, Ms. Lloyd.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from the board? I will just note, there was a revision to the policy between yesterday and the packet that was published in advance of yesterday's work session and today's, and that was to define temporary art as 7 or fewer days as opposed to 5 or fewer. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, in the original packet, the temporary art was designed or was designated as being something that's in place in the right-of-way for 5 or fewer days. We've moved that to 7 now. I think we had a discussion about that in the work session. Thank you for that.
Any public comment on this item? And if you'll please state your name before your comment.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Westgard. I live on Night Ridge Road in Monroe County. It's possible my name sounds familiar to some of you. I was involved with the protests involving the farmers market that occurred a few years ago. And the issue of free speech is something that I'm actively interested in, have been for quite a while. Mr. Raucher made reference to the phrase undue burden, and I think that's an excellent thing to focus on, specifically to think whether this policy puts an undue burden on the Board of Public Works. Federal courts have been quite clear that the things the government can do is to apply time, place, and manner restrictions on speech, expression, art. Speech is defined very broadly, and it includes really any expressive activity. I would note, for one thing, that Mr. Raucher's definition of speech that he's put in this thing is completely novel. It's never been approved by any court. It doesn't exist anywhere other than here, which by itself is an invitation to litigation. The idea that Mike Rooker is going to redefine speech and then put that in front of a federal court and ask them to say, oh, well, you know, you have 200 years of jurisprudence, but I've come up with a new definition and now you have to accept it. At best, you're inviting litigation. What is acceptable, or content-based restrictions are what is clearly not allowed. Again, 200 years of jurisprudence. We have guidance. Time, place, and manner, yes. Content-based restrictions, no. What this does on its face is it says well-known symbols are disallowed. Lesser-known symbols are allowed. That is a content-based restriction. Consider the possibility that a mainline Christian group comes to you and says, we want to put up a sign and we want to use our symbol, the cross. Well, that's clearly not going to pass. That's a universally known symbol. That's down. Well, if I invent a religion yesterday, come up with a novel symbol that nobody else knows, I pass, because that's not widely known. Now, consider, you're the Board of Public Works. You know, you do street signs and you deal with sewers. Why are you looking at the commonness of religious symbols in order, do you have symbologists on staff to consider that? Do you have linguists to contemplate that? Obviously not. And when you're talking about undue burden, why would you put that on the Board of Public Works to contemplate this application to say, well, is this a well-known symbol? And I think Mr. Rooker may have some comments about how that's supposed to be interpreted, but the reality is you have words, specific words, that you're being asked to accept, and those are the words that are going to be in front of the board that looks at this application and either turns it down or accepts it. So if there are better or more legally acceptable reasons for having this policy, they need to be in the law that you pass, not some spoken addendum that nobody's ever going to check. Consider who it is that's going to be looking at this and trying to figure out what's allowable. Sorry, I always get nervous in public speaking and I run out of breath a little bit. There's also a really clear path to do this right. Again, time, place, and manner restrictions. There are government agencies all over the country that handle this. And really, the bottom line is governments aren't, can't, and shouldn't be in the business of restricting speech. What you can do is come up with a few spots where speech can occur. And believe me, I know that what's going to happen is there are going to be some people who want to say some really offensive things that I don't agree with at all. But government is not supposed to be in the business of sorting through what the good speech is and what the bad speech is. Government is supposed to be in the position of saying, here's a space, go ahead and do your thing. We'll have a space over here where other people can come up and say that's a bad idea. Let it stay there for 5 or 7 days and let somebody else come in and paint a new symbol. That's what everyone else is doing throughout the country in this novel definition of speech. When I read it, I kind of can't believe anyone would ever try this or stick it on the Board of Public Works, the manhole cover people, to come up with a definition of what the good symbols are. Why would you put that on the Public Works? All right, I'm repeating myself. Let me just make sure I've hit all my notes. Yeah. What this proposed language does basically is it picks a fight. It picks a fight between people who want to say things in public, which is what we do as a country. We're supposed to have the freedom to say that, including stuff that's awful, and have other people come up and say, hey, that's awful. That's what we're supposed to do as a government and as a country. Don't pick the fight, and don't put Public Works in the position of having to deal with that fight. Find a place where people can paint their thing on the street and let it go. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to. Okay.
Additional questions from the board?
Additional public comment.
Yes.
Good evening. Dave Askins, B Square Bulletin. Good evening, manhole cover people. You might be able to recruit more people to apply for positions on this border commission if you renamed it that. Maybe, I don't know. I have a couple of questions. First question is about Middle Way House and their Wrapped in Love display. So what I'm hoping to find out is next year for 2023 and 2024, for the Wrapped in Love display, will Middle Way House be expected to apply as a special event, as they did in 2021, or will that be handled through the Board of Park Commissioners, as it was this year? So that's question number one. Question two, for temporary art that allows speech, does this policy prevent hate speech? So that's question number two. And then question number three is about American Sign Language. So American Sign Language has hand shapes that correspond to English letters. So taking as an example, would the ASL hand shape that's conventionally associated with the letter K, which is actually a part of the BLM mural, or that was on Eagleson Avenue, would the K hand shape count as a letter as defined in this policy? And I guess I lied, I have a fourth question. Why use the word number instead of a numeral? Because, you know, a number, I think if you ask a mathematician, what's a number? Well, if I put 3 dots and I put a circle around it, that's a set with cardinality 3, which is the number 3, at least for a mathematician. So if you want to represent the number 3, you put 3 dots or 3 of any object, you put a circle around it, that's a set with cardinality 3, but that's not the numeral 3, which I think is probably was the idea behind that part of the policy, but I don't know. I mean, you're banishing different things if you say number versus numeral. So that's the fourth question. Thanks.
Any details we want to add on that, on any of those questions?
Is there any additional public comment?
Do we have any other online public comment?
There is no other comments.
Sure. I'll do my best to address some of the questions that came up. There was a lot of content packed into a small amount of time there, so if I've missed something and the board could refresh my memory, I'd appreciate that. I would start just by saying I promise this isn't Mike Rooker's definition or Mike Rooker's policy. It's the city's policy. There were quite a number of authors. Of course, I'm here before you tonight presenting the policy, but just to be clear on that. There are going to be close cases. We talked about that before when it comes to what is a symbol, what is a logo. I think Ms. Lloyd quite annoyingly pointed one out during the work session, which was whether or not a heart would be a universally recognized symbol. There are going to be close cases like that, and we will have to make some decisions about what qualifies as a universally recognized symbol, as we do with all policies, and we'll have to make a recommendation to this body based on those close cases. That's inevitable. There's no way to draft a policy that does not contain some ambiguity around the corners of it. We do not believe that this policy presents any problems in terms of the way that it regulates speech. It's entirely content neutral. We're saying no speech of any kind. I do believe that's permissible. It's been run past a number of people, and we are comfortable with the definition that's contained in the policy. We will not, I hope, be asking the board to play the role of law professor in figuring out what qualifies and what doesn't under the policy, as we do with all sorts of complicated matters before this board, matters related to engineering, matters related to traffic control. We'll put our heads together, we'll consult with appropriate experts, and we'll bring a recommendation for your consideration, and of course answer any questions that you have. But we won't be expecting you to take on that role. We can understand how that would be something that might be beyond your capacity, and if you want more information, if you want a memo, if you want something like that, we're happy to present you with whatever information you need to make an informed decision about particular applications that might come forward and whether or not they're compliant with the policy. I do regret, unfortunately, that it is your job, though, to make the final decision about these things. You do make decisions about manholes, but you do also statutorily have authority over the right-of-way, so I can't see a way to cut you out of this process. I think you're stuck dealing with it whether you like it or not. And, you know, I do want to also think about the scope of this policy. It's really targeting just private requests to put art installations in the public right-of-way. So as we've already pointed out in this meeting, art within a park is not captured by this. Certainly art on private property is not touched by this policy. So there are all sorts of adequate alternative places and channels for people to do their own communication about things, to speak or use a different medium or a different location or a different space to communicate ideas they want to, which is an important way we can ensure that we're not imposing a policy that's too far beyond that creates First Amendment concerns for the community. With regard to Wrapped in Love going forward, I don't have a clear answer in terms of whether or not that will be approved by the Parks Board or the Board of Public Works. That's something we're going to have to talk about as we move forward. And then also, of course, any request for art in the public right-of-way going forward that would implicate this policy will have to be compliant with the policy. So we will ensure that that happens as well for Wrapped in Love or any other event that's going to place art in the public right-of-way. I think there was a question about hate speech. Hate speech to the extent that it would be something that would fall within the category of something obscene or vulgar that normally wouldn't get full First Amendment protection, that of course wouldn't be permissible. This policy wouldn't touch those sorts of things. Something that were obscene or vulgar or might qualify legally as hate speech still wouldn't be permissible within the right-of-way. So, so there we go. And the next note I have is on sign language, whether or not the K symbol as a sign, in terms of sign language, would be considered I guess, a recognized symbol or a logo. I have not had a long time, of course, to ponder that, just a few minutes. My initial reaction, without having consulted with anybody else, is that that would be a recognized symbol that would be impermissible. So I think that's the likely answer, but I feel a little bit uncomfortable saying that firmly without having spoken with others or thought about it a bit longer. And I don't know, was there another, did anybody take better notes?
Number versus numeral.
Oh. I don't know that, I don't see that as a significant linguistic distinction. Perhaps numeral is a bit more specific, but certainly we're talking about numerals, Roman numerals, something like that when we're talking about numbers in terms of the policy. We weren't going to interpret that to mean anything more than that. So it's right there next to universally recognized symbols or logos, and that's the sort of thing that we're talking about. I think that was it. If I've missed something, please remind me.
The only other note that I was going to just confirm is that because while this policy does mention temporary art is not restricted by the clause, I think it's number 5, as far as speech, symbols, so on and so forth. So in the example of something that's there for 5 to 7 days and then gets replaced with something else, or just doesn't, it just stops existing, one of the two, that type of art is not required to follow the no speech component of this resolution, correct?
That's correct, yeah. The speech component only applies to semi-permanent or permanent art. That's correct. So, was there more to that question, or were you just clarifying?
In Mr. Westgard's public comment mentioned the idea of having space that people could come and place their art for 5 to 7 days, and someone comes along and then puts their art in the place of that. That could happen. That could still exist under this policy. It would not be subject to that same requirement that semi-permanent and permanent art would be.
Yeah, that's correct. Although we would still have to see that application, because there's always concern when we're putting something in the right-of-way that it could create an unsafe situation for drivers or pedestrians. We would still want to see that go through an application process and be reviewed by experts, whether it's going to be there for 2 hours or 20 years, to make sure that it's not going to cause problems for people using the right-of-way for transportation.
And so I would assume that the board can anticipate potentially some updates to the form, the special events form, that will indicate if something includes private art, that would then open up the additional request for, an image of what that art is planned to be, some details about that art. The artist, we talked a little bit in the work session yesterday about artist credentials was one of the elements of review. and any other details that are needed specifically for that type of special event, the placement of that private art.
That's correct. You're always looking ahead. We've actually redrafted that application. We're working on getting it into final form, and our goal is to have that for you at your next meeting. So we didn't want to hit you with too much on one night. We also wanted to see what the policy came out as in final form before we put a final redrafted application in front of you. But yep, that's exactly right.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So if the policy goes into effect and the moratorium for applying is lifted, will people still apply using the current temporary or the current special event application, or wait until the new one is ready?
Yeah, they'll have to apply using the form that we have right now for the next 2 weeks or so, but they'll still be subject to the policy. So there will be some, potential side conversations that have to happen about how a recommendation to this body would look based on what specifically has been applied for. That's exactly right. So, and then hopefully we'll have everything ready for you to look at and potentially approve at your next meeting in terms of an updated special event application that's compliant with this policy.
Any other questions from the board this time? Any other public comments have arisen?
There are no raised hands. I do have a raised hand now. It's Mike McAfee.
Okay.
He would like, yes?
Hi, this is Mike McAfee, the Executive Director of Visit Bloomington. Thank you all. I just want to let you know we produce Freeze Fest with the Mill and Cook Medical. That's happening, tentatively happening the week of January 16th. And just want to let you know we will absolutely follow this policy and do whatever we need to do to work with the city to not be a problem. Won't be a problem for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
No other.
All right. If there are no other comments, no other questions, is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve Resolution 2022-89, the City of Bloomington Policy and Procedures on Private Art Installations within the Public Right-of-Way.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next up is Resolution 2022-86, Freeze Fest.
Hello, I'm Chaz Mottinger, Special Projects Manager in the Economic and Sustainable Development Department at the City of Bloomington. So this is the third annual Freeze Fest, an ice carving festival for Bloomington. World-class ice carvers from Ice of America will carve custom ice sculptures and put them on display in the community. The main carving area will be on Maker's Way in the Trades District. A game zone comprised of games, cornhole, ping pong, etc., made entirely of ice is planned for Madison Street. There will not be 2 outdoor fireplaces. Friday night will host a live ice carving stage show at Upland on their outdoor stage. Saturday, there will be a chili cook-off at the Mill, 5 carving demos mainly on Madison Street, and other supporting activities provided by community partners like Bloomington Parks and Rec. So in your packet, you can see maps detailing the road closures, waste management plan, and traffic plan, and that Freeze Fest will notify and is working with all concerned departments on the matter of the perimeter of the festival and the closure of streets, and has notified residents and businesses in the surrounding area. And if there's any questions, be happy to answer.
Thanks. Questions from the board on this item?
No.
Yesterday during the work session, we had talked about 2 main things. One was a question about cars that were parked in the crosswalk area, which we clarified in the past had been done to comply with Homeland Security requirements of barriers, basically. But it's my understanding after our conversation in the work session that that will not be necessary this year, that there will be approved barriers in place, and that those will not be restricting the crosswalk area. They will be placed so that people can utilize the crosswalk, but the barriers are there to increase the safety of the event.
Yes, that's correct.
And then the other clarification that was made yesterday was that the ice sculptures are not going to be placed in the public right-of-way. So I just wanted to confirm that it makes sense to me that we would be restricting traffic in those rights-of-way for the purposes of the game event, and also just for pedestrian safety and traffic issues. But there's not going to be sculptures like in the streetway or the sidewalk of Maker's Way.
I believe so. If they will be, they can be moved when the roads are not closed, obviously, so that won't be an issue. But I believe like the games would be in the street, like the ice, like the ping pong and whatever. I believe those would be in the street, but not on the sidewalk or anything.
I believe we've got Mike McAfee on the call.
Yeah, he would probably be able to answer it better than I.
Mike, were you able to hear that question?
Yes, I was, and again, the answer to your question is we'll just work with you to place them where they can go. I mean, obviously on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. is our biggest time there at the mill, when we'll have a couple of thousand people walk through there. But you know, we can make sure after that time that you know, everything is out of the way of anything. We'll have the loaders there, and again, work closely with the city on all of that. I mean, because they have been placed in the street and on the sidewalk in the past, but again, whatever works best with this policy is what we'll do.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. McAfee, did you have another comment?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, we can, when we get closer to the time, we can put something in writing, like a diagram showing what the sculptures are going to be and where they're going to be, and run that by somebody, no problem.
That sounds good. I think based on the policy we were just discussing, the fact that they would be temporarily placed in the right-of-way for less than 7 days sounds like the city will be able to work with that under this policy. All right, any other public comment on this item?
There are no additional comments on Zoom.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve Resolution 2022-86 for Freeze Fest.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next up is Amendment Number 1 to Preliminary Engineering Contract with Eagle Ridge Civil Engineering for the Neighborhood Greenways Project.
Good evening, Neil Copper with the Engineering Department. This is an existing contract with Eagle Ridge to perform preliminary engineering services for neighborhood greenways. This amendment reallocates unused funds from projects that have already been completed. It removes design for the project on 7th/Longview from the bypass to Glenwood. It adds design for a project on Morningside from Smith to 3rd. It adds design for a trail connection in existing right-of-way on West Allen Street. The total contract amount increases by $11,169 for a new total not to exceed of $342,845. Staff has reviewed and agrees with the amendment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item?
The decision to remove the design of the project on 7th and Longview and to add the design for the project on Morningside, is that just based on changing priorities within the department?
I think that's primarily correct. We work with planning and transportation on that prioritization. One of the reasons for the switch is that there's a lot of construction going on, especially near Pete Ellis and Longview intersection, so that whole area is, you know, it's not an ideal time to go in there right now. So, yeah, I think that along with just priorities determined by planning.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Any public comment on this item?
No comment on Zoom.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve amendment number 1 to the preliminary engineering contract with Eagle Ridge Civil Engineering for the Neighborhood Greenways project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next up is LPA consulting contract with VS Engineering for preliminary engineering services on the Crosswalk Safety Improvements Project.
Neil Copper again, Engineering Department. This is a new project. It was prioritized through the Metropolitan Planning Organization to receive federal funds for both design and construction. The project went through a request for proposals to select a design firm. That's when VS Engineering was selected from 2 responses. Their contract assumes an evaluation of 9 locations and assumes that up to 6 of those will actually make it into prioritization for construction. Those locations, we don't know exactly what will be designed at them, but those will be chosen, prioritized in coordination with the planning department, and also in order to meet the amount of federal funding that we have. The total contract is set at a not-to-exceed amount of $203,400 with construction in the future in 2025. Staff, again, has reviewed and supports the contract, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Any public comment on this item?
No comment on Zoom.
Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the LPA consulting contract with VS Engineering for preliminary engineering services on the Crosswalk Safety Improvements project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Next up is preliminary engineering contract with Bledsoe Riggert Cooper James for the Morris Pike Southeast Park Trail realignment.
Hi, Patrick Durgis, Engineering Department. This trail realignment is to correct a safety issue that's been identified over the years with the location of the trail that is adjacent to Morris Pike at the Southeast Park. There's concerns with both the trail is a significant elevation below the road, while also very close to the road with a steep grade between the road and the trail. And so this project was identified as something that needed to happen. The engineering department requested use of ARPA funds for this project. And then BRCJ was selected from our engineering on-call list. With familiarity to the area and basically size of project and scope, we felt was best for their services. The contract is set at not to exceed amount of $34,080. Available for any questions.
Questions from the board? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the preliminary engineering contract with Bledsoe Riggert Cooper James for the Morris Pike Southeast Park Trail realignment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Contract with Smock Fansler Corporation for the 10th and Jefferson Retaining Wall Project.
Good evening. This is Sarah Gomez with the Engineering Department. The contract award for the 10th and Jefferson retaining wall was, excuse me, not the contract, the quote was put out and opened yesterday at the Board of Public Works work session. The project will replace a damaged portion of the western retaining wall at the underpass on East 10th Street as depicted on the plans, and the project will be funded by the Public Works budget line. Construction is scheduled for 2023 to last 3 consecutive days, will begin on a Friday and be completed by 11 a.m. on Sunday. At any time that traffic is impacted, the contractor is required to provide temporary traffic control on East 10th Street consistent with temporary one-lane, two-way traffic control flagging method in full compliance with IMUTCD requirements. In the event that pedestrian traffic is impacted, a detour route around the project area utilizing Union Street and the existing sidewalk north of the railroad shall be used. The quotes, as I said, were received at the Board of Public Works work session and opened on Monday, December 19th, 2022. And the board received the following quote, just one from Smock Fanzer Corporation for $38,904.76, excuse me, with Smock Fanzer Corporation as the parent lowest responsive and responsible quoter. We request that the board award the contract to Smock Fanzer Corporation for that amount.
Thank you.
Happy to answer questions.
Questions from the board? I take it, since it's coming with staff recommendation, this did fall within the anticipated budgeted amount that the department expected for a project like this?
It did. We were very pleased with that.
Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the contract with Smock Fanzer Corporation for the 10th and Jefferson retaining wall project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is request from Duke Energy for lane and sidewalk closures along North and South Rogers and South Morton Street. This is January 3rd, 2023 through January 27th of 2023.
Good evening. Paul Kerber with the Engineering Department. Duke Energy is starting the next phase of their Bloomington reliability project. Before they start that phase, they'll be doing the vegetation removal. This will be ultimately the project will connect the substation at 11th and Rogers with the substation on Rogers near Switchyard Park. And they'll be going down Rogers, Madison, Morton, and eventually Patterson Grimes over to Rogers again. And they'll be doing the vegetation removal from January 3rd to January 27th, 2023. This work will include lane and sidewalk closures as they work throughout the project. They will be working in phases. It won't be the whole thing at one time. And Duke has done a lot of community outreach over the last year ahead of this project. Again, this is just for the vegetation removal. The rest of the project will come at a later time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the request from Duke Energy for lane and sidewalk closures along North and South Rogers and South Morton Street from January 3rd, 2023 to January 27, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next is a request from Renaissance Inc. for lane closures on West First Street, and this is January 3rd, 2023 to January 13th of 2023.
Again, Paul Kerber with Engineering. Renaissance Inc. is continuing their work on the demolition of the former IU Health Bloomington Hospital. To complete the demolition of the South Tower, which is adjacent to First Street, they're requesting a westbound lane closure on West First Street from Fairview to Rogers. This will allow them to safely remove the tower. The work will take place January 3rd through January 13th, 2023, and the lane closure will only be during the day from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the request from Renaissance Inc. for lane closures on West First Street from January 3rd, 2023 to January 13, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is staff reports and other business.
All righty, Adam Wason, Public Works Director again. As you alluded to in your opening comments, I was going to talk about the upcoming potential for a winter weather event. We've been actively working with our weather service and watching the models and forecasts that have been coming through for late this week. Current indications seem to be that late Thursday afternoon, we could start getting some rainfall, and then Thursday evening have some really significant drops in temperature, as well as some continued snowfall through the evening. And then looks like Friday morning could be really, really cold. They're expecting potential wind chills as low as -30 on Friday. Yeah, that's the face I made Jennifer when I saw that. It was, going to be some of the possibly coldest weather we've seen in many, many years. So city street crews are currently, and for the last, today, tomorrow, have been switching all of our gear from leafing season into snow control mode. So many thanks to the crews down at the street department and fleet maintenance for all that work leading up to what we expect to be pretty significant weather on Thursday, Friday, and possibly into Saturday morning. I won't, the projections for snow accumulation are ranging. What we do know is there will be stuff falling from the sky, is my guess, and that the winds will be quite heavy too on what seems to be Friday, with potential gusting. There's predictions that wind gusts could reach 50 miles an hour and visibility could be very challenging. So we're going to monitor. We're going to do what we do for any of these winter weather events. Get as prepared as we possibly can, and then respond as the winter weather events develop. So just big thanks to Joe Van Deventer, the superintendent down at the street department, all his crews, Jason Spear over at Fleet. They are working really hard to make sure we're prepared and ready to go. Beyond that, in terms of whether government operations continue on Friday and such, we'll work closely with our other governmental partners in the area to determine if there's any closures of like City Hall or government services otherwise. We did cancel, so a good thing is sanitation operates Monday through Thursday mainly, and then really small staff on the weekends doing downtown and park routes and such. We did suspend our additional pickups for Friday for sanitation, knowing temperatures are going to be pretty dangerous. So we did inform those residents and customers that had requested an additional pickup for Friday that we would look to get that the following week. Salt barn is full. If it's raining Thursday afternoon, we won't be able to get out with our brine pre-treatment. If it goes right to snow, we'll monitor that and try to get out as much as we can in advance. As I was talking with someone else about today, if it does get into those -20 wind chill type scenarios, the salt won't melt anything on the ground at that point. So just FYI, we'd need warmer temperatures even to have the salt working. But if the snow's accumulating, we'll have the plows down and try to, as we always do, start with the mains. We go from the highest volume streets down to the lowest volume streets. So just for residents that might live on a very low volume street, we apologize. You'll be our last priority, but we'll get everything within the zones as quickly as we possibly can. And appreciate everyone's patience. As always, if we've got snow on the ground and in the roads, just making sure that everybody's slowing down, being as safe as possible. If you got the snowplow behind you or in front of you, let them go and clear the roads for you. That's our best advice. So happy to answer any questions beyond that. Animal shelter's pretty full. We could use some adopters. So anyone looking for a nice cuddly friend for this winter holiday season, we've got plenty of those down at the animal shelter. And just wish everybody happy holidays, safe travels if they're traveling, and looking forward to a great 2023.
Thank you. Next up is approval of claims. Is there any questions from the board on claims? Any public comment on claims?
No comment on Zoom.
Seeing none. Is there a motion on claims?
I move that we approve claims in the amount of $1,090,761.09.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And if there's nothing else this evening, I will call for adjournment.
you.